Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Foreign Press Center's space in the Democratic National Convention Filing Center in Charlotte. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Nadia Hussain, political blogger for Hyphen Magazine and a California delegate at the DNC convention. She will be speaking about the political impact of Muslim Americans. After she makes her opening remarks, we'll take Q&A, and please be prepared to get the microphone from either side of you and state your name and publication when you ask a question. Without further ado, here's Nadia.
Thank you all very much for being here today, and I'm truly very honored that the State Department asked me to come in today to speak with all of you. So I'll just have some opening remarks. The State Department told me to just talk about myself and then talk a little bit about Muslim participation and sort of what that means and my own personal role that I've played. So I guess I'll just talk about, I'm a delegate. I'm a delegate from California, District 13, under Congresswoman Barbara Lee. I have not always been involved with the Democratic Party. I'm 28. I'm still young, but but I will say that my interest in politics did come early. I just didn't know what it was called. I will actually go way back. My mother's grandfather used to politic with Gandhi, and there's a quote that Gandhi says. It goes like, You need to be the change that you want to see in the world. Something to that tune. And the reason I bring that up is because my mother's grandfather politicked with Gandhi. He worked for rights of everybody, regardless of their background, back in South Asia at that time. And I think that's how I live my life. I think I want to see the world change a certain way. I want it to be more inclusive. And I think that quote really does drive what I do and the reason behind my interest in politics. And my parents always told me, I was born in the United States. My parents are immigrants from Bangladesh. They always told me that I was really lucky to be here, that in my country, Bangladesh is still a developing country, that there was a lot of poverty, that I was very lucky to have food, to have a home, to have a loving family, to have education. And they always drove that point home. That was just so important to them. So even as a little kid, I always thought, I need to help. I need to help my community. I need to do as much as I can to make the world a better place. And growing up, I didn't actually know what politics was. It sounded something so high up there, something so disassociated from me. But as I grew older, I started seeing politics as a tool to make that change, to improve my community in the way I had always wanted to, in that way I had wanted to as a child and continued to want to do as an adult. And in terms of the Democratic Party and being here at the Democratic National Convention, I actually only recently, probably about a year, I joined the East Bay Young Democrats. It's a Young Democrats club in California, and I became a chartering board member of the Black Young Democrats of the East Bay to help empower the Black African American community in Oakland, California, to be more civically engaged. And through that involvement, a fellow board member called me up one day. Now I'd known that the DNC was happening. I knew that some people were running for delegates. There were some online trainings. But I just didn't know. I didn't know if I could fundraise to make it here. I didn't really know what it meant to be a delegate. And I didn't know if I could make it, if I could really do it. So I wanted to do it, but I wasn't really sure. And then my friend Igor Tregov called me up. And Igor's he's actually of a Russian Jewish background. That's his ancestry. But he reached out to me not because of my background, not because of just my name. He saw me as a person that can make an impact. And he called me and he said, Nadia, I really think you should do this. I think you should be a delegate. I would love to see you run. We need more diversity in our delegation. And I think you could really bring a lot to the table. And that's all I needed. I needed a little push to just take that step and run to be a delegate. And in April, I ran, and I was elected to be a delegate from my congressional district and come here to the Democratic National Convention. So it's been a great journey. I'm super excited to be here. And so I'll shift a little bit, because that's just my political journey, about how does that relate to the Muslim American civic participation and the political movement of Muslim Americans in this country. So I grew up in a Muslim American family. It's been a part of my identity ever since I was born. And when I was running to be a delegate, one of the main reasons I ran was because I did not see a lot of people that looked like me, even though the Democratic Party is very diverse. And as you're seeing, we have an amazingly diverse delegation. But I was South Asian, young woman, and a Muslim. And I just didn't see that many people with a name like Hussein up there. So that's actually another reason why I wanted to go. I want to be that change. I wanted to see more Muslims. I wanted to see more South Asians there. So you know what? I'm here. So that's why I ran. And I've been doing a lot of work and advocacy with Muslim American civil rights groups. And civic participation is definitely one of the most important aspects of that. And Muslim participation in this country, it's a newer immigration group overall of Muslim Americans, and before September 11th, there was a lot of activities for Muslims to come together and become civically engaged. September 11th really set that movement back by many years. And what's happening now is, in the past 11 years, there hasn't been as much Muslim American civic participation, even though Obama's gotten a lot of support, like 70 to 80%, something like that, of Muslim American votes. But what I'm seeing now at this current state, and I'll stop here after I just talk about the current state, is that this is really a rebuilding state. The last 11 years have been very challenging for the Muslim American community, especially when it comes to politics and civic engagement. And I think there's 100 Muslim delegates that are here in the Democratic National Convention in 2012. So I feel like it's a seed that's sprouting. We're growing again. Everything sort of got raised to the ground a bit, and now it's time to come back to fruition. So thank you very much. That was my opening statement, and I don't know if you want to talk or we open it up for questions.
As noted before, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone, which could be coming from our side, and state your name and publication of the transcript. We have a first question. Down here.
Thank you. My name is Ruben Barrera. I'm a reporter from Mexico with the Mexican news agency Notimex. My question is not about how people in your community see this election, but I'm interested in knowing how do you see the enthusiasm among young people in this election now that I guess that you have a lot of interaction with other young people in California, and there has been a lot of talk that this year, or for this election, the enthusiasm that we saw among young people in 2008 won't be the same. So I would like to know, what is your impression?
Overall on young people's involvement, right? So I think I definitely, like I said, I am on the board I'm a part of an organization of young Democrats, and they're under 35, so they're very active. I think that there is still a lot of energy in the youth vote to work with Obama. There's been a lot of press coverage of how, the energy is not exactly the same. 2008 was all about hope, and what happened to all that? I think that I do think that things have shifted. The first time around, he was new. It was novel. It was this new, exciting thing. And 4 years later, things. I think things are going well. That's my personal opinion. But there is going to be some dampening of energy just because it's not the first time around. But I will say that I think so. I think that youth involvement has gone down. I think that's my opinion compared to what it was in 2008. I wasn't as involved in 2008 as I am now, so I might not be the best judge of the exact change. But what I will say is, judging from what I saw yesterday at the Democratic National Convention, the young speakers, someone like Julian Castro, I think there's going to be some invigoration. I'm really excited to see what happens this week when this convention's over and we go back home, because I think the young people that we saw speaking on stage, the younger politicians. I think you might see an uplift actually amongst young people volunteering.
I would follow on and ask, how have you seen the role of Arab Americans in elections change from 2008 until today?
Did everybody hear that question? Okay. 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 So he asked that how did Arab American involvement change from 2008 to 2012 today? So I'm not a representative from the Arab American community, and that's also a very diverse community, many from many different religious backgrounds and countries. But from my feeling, I might be a little bit more. I'm well versed about about Muslim participation. I did mention this is a statistic out there that the majority of Muslims that did vote in 2008 overwhelmingly voted in favor of Barack Obama. But in terms of involvement, it really did seem a little quieter. And it's what I said, after September 11th happened, there was a bit of a shift in this country where many Muslim Americans were made to feel that they just weren't American, that they were suspect. And it was just all around them. And I think when a community is faced with that kind of environment or that kind of perception, there's a fear to be out there, to put yourself out there when you don't feel like you'll be received positively. And I think that in 2008, it was just not as active. I didn't hear that much about it, honestly. But this year, for example, I'm part of a group called the American Muslim Alliance. That's actually one of the articles I did a blog about it. That their goal was to get the same percentage of Muslim delegates into this Democratic National Convention as there were in the population. So that'd be about 2%. Right now, there's like I mentioned earlier, there's 100 Muslim delegates. So I really noticed a leap, and that to me is very promising in terms of the future of Muslim American civic involvement.
My name is Fouad Arif. I'm Bureau Chief of the Moroccan News Agency in Washington. I would like to ask you about the current economic situation. How will it play out for the Muslim community in terms of turnout in favor of Barack Obama come next November? Thank you.
So, demographically, a lot of the Muslim Americans in this country are shown to be doing economically well in terms of salary level of education. That's just in the statistics. I think that, I'll be honest, I think that, and this is my opinion, I can only speak of my own experience, I think that of course they care about the economy, but I think that Obama's economic plan probably falls more in line with what a lot of people in the immigrant community agree with in terms of economic policy. Also, some of the civil rights issues, I think that people feel, Muslim Americans feel that Democrats are more on their side. They feel part of the Democratic Party. I think that's going to be a bigger factor in voting as opposed to just the economics, because honestly, the Republican Party has isolated the Muslim community to such a extreme degree that I would say that support will overwhelmingly go to the Democrats for those reasons I mentioned.
This is Azim Mian from Geo News, Pakistan. And my question is, why the Muslims after post 9/11, were they traumatized? That's why they have shrunk. Otherwise, before 9/11, they were kind of an emerging community in the USA who were politically active and financially well. Now, what's your view? What are the reasons? And second question is that don't you think the community leadership in Bangladeshi community, in Pakistani community, in Arab Muslim community, they have not been, because they belong to the affluent class, so they have not been able to cultivate and motivate the grassroots level of their own Muslim communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So let me just think for a bit, collect my thoughts. So you mentioned fear or intimidation Could that be a factor in the decrease of Muslim participation in the political sphere? I mean, in American history, whenever there's been any kind of attack, there's always been scapegoating of a group. So yes, that part of that's true. You know, I will say that there has been, because of the fear that people felt that the Muslim world or Muslims were the enemy because of the September 11th attacks, because of extreme acts of people outside of this country. I mean, it happened in this country, but they were not Americans. Because of what was happening abroad or what was brought into this country, the domestic Muslim Americans suffered. They were seen and treated with suspicion. There were definitely some legislation that hurt some of the civil rights issues, but not just that. There was just I think Americans in general felt this fear about the unknown, about the Muslim neighbors that they may never have really looked at. So I think that if anybody feels like they're being made into a suspect, they immediately feel defensive. They immediately feel like they need to draw back or shrink down. And I think that the community did feel that. They felt a lot of resistance. They felt a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of fear. So that was one of the reasons that September 11th really did impact the organizing very negatively. And it's the remnants of that are still here today. In terms of, you were talking about community, in terms of the community leaders and the leadership, it's true that in the 1990s the community leaders were active. I believe maybe nationally in the 90s, there were about 700 elected officials in different capacities who were Muslim American nationally. And now, I don't think it's just that. I don't think that it's because people are out of touch or leaders are out of touch. I think that they're rebuilding. They're slowly rebuilding. There are amazing grassroots organizations that involve South Asians and Arab Americans and Muslim Americans who are making a lot of effort to get people involved and engaged, reaching out to communities, going to community centers, having town hall meetings where community members can come out and learn and be engaged and get some kind of civic education. So it's a slow journey. I think the leadership is being rebuilt, and I think people are slowly starting to step up. But again, like I think that people are rebuilding. So you're seeing us in the rebuilding process.
Stéphane Bussard, Le Temps newspaper, Switzerland. As far as the Democratic Party is concerned, I have a question about the Israeli-Palestinian issue, which is never a very easy issue to tackle within the party. There's been a shift in the political platform of the Democratic Party from saying that actually there's an unshakable relation to Israel and things like that, but on the other hand now, you dampened a little bit the whole story saying that Jerusalem shouldn't be the capital of Israel. How do you see this issue within the Democratic Party? Because obviously there's an uneasy relation to this issue. And secondly, how is it perceived maybe among Muslim Americans? Thank you.
And I agree. It's a very complicated issue. It's a very long-standing issue. I will say that since that doesn't relate as directly to the civic participation, I don't think that I'm well equipped to answer it. So I will just say that I know it's a very difficult issue and one that will keep playing on, unfortunately, but it's not one that I can really speak to in terms of civic participation.
Hi, thank you. Joyce Karam with Al Hayat newspaper. I had met in Tampa some Muslim Republicans who actually voiced concerns about social issues in the Democratic Party, abortion, gay rights, other issues. How do you reconcile your positions, with the Muslim community with what the Democrats are adopting today.
Do you mean me personally or the Muslim community?
Both.
Well, I know that me personally, the views I hold, I've always held, and they've never, for me, they've never come in conflict with any religion with my Muslim beliefs at all. So, so I've had no problem supporting the Democratic Party and the platform that they have on social issues. So, in the 90s, there's actually a lot more Republican Muslims voting Republican. George W. Bush in 2000 when he ran got an overwhelming amount of support from the Muslim community. Most Muslims voted Republican that year. In fact, in Florida, tens of thousands of Muslims voted for George W. Bush, which very well may have caused him to win the election. Because, as you know, Florida was won by about 500 votes. But in terms of, the reasons for that are that many Muslims identified with some of the social conservatism, and therefore they felt comfortable supporting the Republican Party. A lot has changed. A lot has changed since that time. You know, we keep going back to September 11th because it's sort of like when the world cracked, or many things sort of cracked, and the vibrations of that have been felt for so long, and the demonization of the Muslim communities, which were done very harshly by many members and elected officials in the Republican Party, candidates in the Republican Party, and you could see this recently. Just open the news and you'll see it even a month ago with Michelle Bachmann, that Muslims feel like their interests are being served by the Democratic Party. You know, individually they might have their views on certain social issues, but at this point, I think that the civil rights, the acceptance of Muslims into the Democratic fold is perhaps trumping that, because I have not seen a lot of Muslim American Republicans at this point.
Can you say anything about the language that the GOP uses? I mean, Romney used it in describing terrorism. He did call it Islamic terrorism. I mean, is that an issue for Muslim Americans?
Rhetoric is always an issue. Think about, and you all work in media. We are inundated by messaging and advertising in media. Media is everywhere. It's social media, it's TV media, it's print media, it's everywhere. So when rhetoric is repeated over and over again, directed in one direction, it really impacts social situations. I really believe so. So when terms like Islamic terrorists or just, you know, Michelle Bachmann saying these comments about high-level members of the Democratic Party and of elected officials, when people start using these negative terms, or maybe perhaps even misleading terms, the effects of that really ripple outward, and it affects the community. And I really hope that changes, because that is very damaging to the way Muslim Americans are perceived and treated in this country.
Ansgar Graf from the German newspaper Die Welt. Just regarding to your last answer, what would you have recommended if the Republican Party would have asked you how to describe this kind of terrorism? Because I think only to say we have to fight against terrorism or there has been a terrorist somewhere would be a little bit too less specific. What would you have recommended how to describe this kind of terrorism?
Just call it terrorism. That's what it is. It's terrorism. That's really like what I have to say about that. It's either call it terrorism or talk about a region, maybe name a country, but say attaching a religion to it every single time you mention that word, it just makes people think that's what the religion is. And so I say terrorism. I don't see why you have to add a religion to it.
Just to follow up, but don't you think, for example, our readers or our listeners wouldn't have asked about the background of this kind of terrorism? So at some point you have to explain what kind of terrorism is it. And just to say there was a terrorist attack, I think it's not enough.
So, for example, the attack that happened in Oak Creek in Wisconsin, that was considered a domestic terrorism act, domestic terrorism, and they did say, oh, he was a white supremacist, but I never heard of someone say, oh, he's a Christian terrorist or he's a white terrorist. Why did I'm just, were readers not concerned, or when they're reading, did they think, why didn't they say white terrorist? Why are they not more specific about what kind of terrorist he is? I'm just saying that in terms of, that makes you really think about what it means to message. And I think that's more about messaging than about detail. Oh, sorry.
Are there any final questions? If there are no final questions, this event is now concluded. Thank you all for attending. We will have a transcript as soon as it becomes available.